welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at something fascinating in conservation biology. Why some invasive species just take off, becoming way more successful than they ever were back home.
Yeah, and often the answer isn't just about that one species. It's about who they interact with, sometimes in really unexpected ways.
Exactly. So we're doing a deep dive into a really key paper. It's from 2003 in Ecology Letters. The lead author is Michael J. Adams, and it's called Indirect Facilitation of an Anuran Invasion by Non-Native Fishes.
Right. And our goal today, well, it's pretty straightforward. We want to unpack how the North American bullfrog, which is, a major pest worldwide, managed to become so incredibly dominant in Western North America.
It's a great story.
It really is. And it involves this alliance almost between two different invasive species, an alliance that really hammers native biodiversity.
An unintended alliance, right? They're not actively cooperating.
Oh, absolutely not. It's an ecological consequence. And this paper, it provided some really crucial early experimental evidence for what ecologists call the invasional meltdown hypothesis.
Ah, yes, invasional meltdown. So the idea that invaders can actually help each other invade.
Precisely. When non-native species interact positively, maybe one provides food or shelter, or in this case, something more subtle, it can just accelerate the whole invasion process, making the ecosystem impacts much, much worse. This paper showed how that can happen indirectly.
Okay, let's set the scene. Who's the main player here?
The main player is the American bullfrog, Rana catesbiana.
Right. Native to the eastern U.S., but now, well, pretty much everywhere. Mexico, Western Canada, you see them in Japan, Italy.
They're global travelers.
And they're a huge problem because they're massive amphibians and they eat everything. Seriously, other frogs, fish, snakes, sometimes even small birds or mammals.
They're incredibly voracious predators, and wherever they show up, native animals, especially other amphibians, really suffer.
So to understand why they did so well out west, we need to think about where they came from in the east.
Exactly. Back east, bullfrogs evolved alongside certain types of warm water fish specifically, centarchid sunfish, like bluegill. And because they grew up together evolutionarily speaking, the bullfrog tadpoles developed defenses. They taste bad, or maybe act in ways that put fish off. Basically, sunfish learned not to eat them.
So they have a sort of get-out-of-jail-free card when it comes to those fish.
Pretty much, yeah. But nature loves trade-offs, right?
Always.
While they're safe from those specific fish, bullfrog tadpoles are definitely not safe from big, predatory aquatic insects.
Ah, okay. Different predators.
Right. And in the western ponds they invaded, their main enemy turned out to be native dragonfly nymphs, particularly the big ones from the Esnidae family. These things love bullfrog tadpoles.
Okay, so tadpoles are safe from eastern fish, but vulnerable to western insects. Now, where did the introduced fish come in?
This is the clever bit the Adams paper zeroes in on. Those native dragonfly nymphs, the ones eating the bullfrog tadpoles, they themselves are a favorite food for those same warm water fish, like the bluegill, that the bullfrogs co-evolved with.
Wait, so the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Kind of. The hypothesis was this. In the West, especially in places like Oregon's Willamette Valley, many ponds historically didn't have big fish populations like bluegills.
Right, maybe they were temporary or just had smaller native fish.
Exactly. So when people introduced non-native centarchids like bluegill into these ponds, those fish started eating the native dragonfly nymphs.
Which were the main predators of the bullfrog tadpoles.
Precisely. So the introduced fish weren't helping the bullfrogs directly. They likely still found the tadpoles unpalatable. Instead, they were helping indirectly by taking out the bullfrog's major predator. It's like removing the tadpole's bodyguard.
That's a really neat ecological loop. So
Yeah.
how did they test this idea?
They used a really solid two-part approach out there in the Willamette Valley. First, a classic manipulative field experiment.
The gold standard.
Absolutely. They set up these enclosures in a pond, really controlled conditions, and they manipulated two things: the presence or absence of the non-native bluegill, and the presence or absence of those native Esnid dragonfly nymphs.
So 4 combinations, basically. Fish, no fish, nymphs, no nymphs.
Exactly, a factorial design. This let them directly test if the fish presence boosted tadpole survival specifically by affecting the nymphs.
Okay, makes sense. And the second part?
The second part was scaling up. They did these big field surveys. Over 3 years, they looked at 85 different ponds.
Wow, okay.
And they collected data on all sorts of things: pond size, how much shade it had, whether it dried out sometimes, how shallow it was, and crucially, what fish were actually living there. native, non-native, or none.
A lot of variables.
A ton. And then they use some pretty sophisticated statistical modeling. It's called an information theoretic approach, using AICC to basically pit dozens of different potential explanations against each other.
So instead of just testing one hypothesis, they let the data tell them which combination of factors best explain where the bullfrogs were actually thriving in the real world.
That's the idea. Really powerful way to deal with complex ecological systems.
Okay, so let's go back to the experiment first. The key prediction was, if you add bluegill, do the dragonfly nymphs decrease, and does that help the bullfrog tadpole survive?
And the results were, well, pretty dramatic. Let's look at tadpole survival first.
Okay.
In the enclosures without the dragonfly nymphs, tadpole survival was decent, around 57%.
Right.
But add those native Aeschnid dragonfly nymphs, their natural predator out west, and tadpole survival just plummeted, down to only 10%.
Wow, that's a huge drop. So those nymphs are really effective predators.
Extremely effective. But here's the crucial link, the mechanism. What happened to the dragonfly nymphs when the bluegill were present?
Ah, right.
Their survival also crashed. Without bluegill, about 85% of the nymphs survived the experiment.
Yep.
With bluegill present, only 13% survived.
Good grief. So the non-native fish were just wiping out the bullfrog's main predator.
That's exactly what the experiment showed. The bluegill were devastating the Aeschnid population.
So putting it all together,
Yeah.
the dragonfly nymphs basically meant zero tadpole survival.
Practically zero, yeah.
Unless the non-native fish were there to eat the nymphs first.
Precisely. When the bluegill were present, reducing nymph numbers, then the tadpoles could survive. And this was really significant because it was the first clear experimental proof of this kind of indirect facilitation, this trophic cascade between two different non-native vertebrates.
It's like the bullfrog brought its evolutionary history with it, and it just happened to be perfectly suited to exploit this new situation created by another invader.
It's an amazing example of ecological contingency. Its defense against one type of enemy, the fish, becomes an advantage because that same enemy removes its other main enemy, the insects.
Okay, so that's the controlled experiment. How did this play out in the real world across those 85 ponds they surveyed? Did the pattern hold up?
It held up incredibly strongly, especially when they looked at bullfrog abundance, like how many bullfrogs were actually caught per trap.
Not just present absent, but how successful they were.
Exactly. When they ran all those statistical models trying to figure out what best predicted high bullfrog numbers, one model came out way on top.
And what was in that model?
Two key things. The presence of non-native fish, NNFIH, and the percentage of the pond that was shallow water.
Shallow. Non-native fish in shallow water.
Yep. And when I say it came out on top, the statistical weight, the sort of confidence the model assigned to it compared to all the other possibilities was about 0.998.
99.8%. That's almost unheard of in field ecology.
It's incredibly strong support. It basically said these two factors together are overwhelmingly the best explanation for why bullfrogs get really abundant.
And how big was the effect of the non-native fish?
It was huge. The actual trap rate for bullfrogs, a measure of their abundance, went from about 0.1 frogs per trap night in ponds without non-native fish.
Okay, pretty low.
2.9 frogs per trap night in ponds with non-native fish. A 9-fold increase.
9 times more abundant just based on whether those introduced fish were there.
Yeah. And the interaction with shallowness is really interesting, too. It wasn't just that bullfrogs liked shallow ponds. They reached their highest numbers in shallow ponds only if the non-native fish were also present. If a pond was shallow but didn't have non-native fish, bullfrogs tended to actually avoid it.
Why would that be? What's special about shallow water?
Well, shallow water often means more aquatic vegetation, more structure, more hiding places.
Ah, perfect habitat for dragonfly nymphs.
Exactly. So in a shallow pond without non-native fish, it's probably crawling with predators, a death trap for tadpoles.
Right.
But put the non-native fish in there, and those fish can efficiently hunt down the dragonfly nymphs hiding in that vegetation. The fish essentially make the shallows safe for the bullfrogs.
It makes perfect sense. It turns a risky area into the best possible area thanks to the introduced fish.
It really paints a clear picture of the mechanism in action across the landscape.
And just to clarify a point from the paper, they did find some ambiguity when just looking at whether bullfrogs were present at all, right? Sometimes it seemed like any fish helped.
That's true. The models for just presence-absence weren't quite as clear-cut as for abundance. It suggested maybe any fish, or shallowness alone, could play a role in initial colonization.
Right.
But that ambiguity doesn't really contradict the main finding. For the invasion to be successful, for bullfrogs to reach those high ecosystem-altering densities, the abundance, that's where the link to non-native fish was incredibly strong and clear.
Got it. So thinking bigger picture, what does this study tell us about invasional meltdown?
It's a really powerful confirmation. It shows these positive interactions between invaders don't have to be direct, like pollination or seed dispersal. They can be complex, indirect, working through the food web like this trophic cascade. Fish eat insects, which helps frogs.
And it also helps explain why maybe native fish don't have the same effect, right?
Exactly. The researchers made a strong case for that. Native fish in that region are often different. Maybe they can't eat such large dragonfly nymphs because their mouths are smaller, or maybe they just aren't as common in the specific pond habitats bullfrogs prefer.
So it's really these specific introduced fish, the centarchids, that are driving this effect.
The evidence points very strongly that way. The facilitation seems specific to these non-native warm water predators adapted to eat things like dragonfly nymphs effectively.
Did the study have any limitations the authors mentioned? Things maybe their data couldn't fully address?
Yeah, a couple of things. Interestingly, some factors you might expect to be important, like whether the pond was man-made or natural or just its overall size, didn't turn out to be strong predictors in their models.
Hmm.
Also, pond permanence, whether it holds water all year, wasn't as important as they thought it might be, but they did note their study happened during a drought, which could have potentially messed with that variable, making even permanent ponds seem less permanent.
Okay, environmental context matters.
Always. And they also acknowledge that bullfrogs do sometimes persist in ponds without non-native fish, suggesting maybe natural fluctuations in dragonfly numbers play a role too, but the key driver of high abundance was definitely the fish.
So what's the big takeaway for managing invasive species like bullfrogs?
While it suggests that just focusing on removing the bullfrog itself might be incredibly difficult, maybe even futile, if you don't address the underlying ecological reason why they're so successful there.
You mean tackling the non-native fish?
Exactly. In these historically fishless or fish-poor pond systems, the introduced centarchids are acting like what we call a keystone invader. They're the linchpin holding this altered ecosystem together.
So rather than chasing frogs, maybe focus on removing the fish.
That's the implication. If you can manage or remove the non-native fish from these vulnerable ponds, you might restore the natural control exerted by the native predators, like the dragonfly nymphs. They could potentially keep the bullfrog numbers in check naturally. It shifts the focus from direct pest control to restoring ecosystem resistance.
That's a really valuable insight.
So, wrapping it up, the real nugget here is understanding that this massive bullfrog invasion was turbocharged by an old evolutionary relationship. The bullfrog's defense against its co-evolved fish predators back east became a huge advantage out west when those same fish were introduced and started taking out the bullfrog's new main predators.
A three-step indirect trophic effect. Fish eat the macroinvertebrates, which means more bullfrogs survive.
You got it. Experimental proof of invasional meltdown happening through an indirect pathway?
It really drives home how complex these ecological communities are, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And how conservation needs to look beyond just the obvious bad guy, the bullfrog in this case, and understand the whole network of interactions, especially those involving other non-native species like these fish.
Absolutely. You have to look at the enablers.
So here's a final thought for you, our listener, to chew on. This study revealed a powerful invasion synergy created basically by transplanting a co-evolved relationship to a new continent. Given how much we move species around the globe now, through trade, shipping, even accidentally, how many other silent, indirect partnerships like this might be forming between different invaders right now?
Yeah, partnerships that are amplifying invasions and altering ecosystems in ways we haven't even begun to detect yet.
The bullfrog and the sunfish might just be one example we happen to understand well. What else is out there? Something to think about.